before we move on. It's great that you're here and we actually have a conversation. And so while I understand everybody's frustrated this is taking too long, it is not. We don't get the HR person except for this one time a year. So if we're going to move on, then I think we should reserve the ability to bring you back and to be able to ask you these questions, especially when we get more into the insurance and stuff. I just don't want to just move on and forget about it, because
you're more than welcome to call my office as well, and I can meet with you.
I would prefer things to be done in the public, because the public is very interested in these conversations. So that's my comment. I'd like to be able to bring Stephanie back.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Okay, well then, to sum up my HR budget, I asked for the $2 across the board for all the employees and to increase the starting wage to $2. Is there any, I hate to say, is there any more questions, but I guess in order to end that, are we finished with that? Yay, okay. Now we're going on to the newsletter. The newsletter is number 431. I'm sorry, I've got to tear my notes off the back of this. We didn't have much of a newsletter last year due to COVID shutting a lot of stuff down, but hopefully this year we're going to get back on the ball with that. You jump down to, that's number 431, but then jump down to line item number 12 for printing. We do have 2 newsletters that go out now that's fairly big. They used to all be 4 pages. We now have 2 that are 8 pages because of all of the spring and summer and fall activities that go on. So those tend to run a little bit larger. So we're just asking for an increase of $150 for the printing charges. Line item 18 is for postage. It's $500 more. Again, postage is probably going to go up some, and that is for the whole 4 quarters. Line item 41, materials and supplies. We do take labor cost out of that. We discussed that with the lady down at SW Resources, and she says there probably will be an increase, so we've allowed for that for an additional $500. Any questions on that budget? Great, thank you.
Okay, we'll start with the treasurer line item. I decreased the amount that was in travel. I decreased the amount that was in training and education. I believe that was the only changes. Slightly increased the dues and subscriptions, just for the reasons that were given prior. Does anybody have any questions about anything that gets spent out of there, or? We'll move on to the city council budget. I was asked to put $30,000 in for a comprehensive plan for this year. Other than that, I don't believe there were any changes in this line item. Would you like to speak to that?
I asked for the $30,000 comprehensive plan. Reason I asked for that is, we've seen the results of a comprehensive plan or a master plan in our park system, and we've seen the results of the water and sewer. Those are 2 components that are now completed that can go into a comprehensive plan, right? Mm-hmm. And Vienna, we haven't had a comprehensive plan since, I think the last one was in 2007. A lot of things have changed since 2007. Most notable change, of course, has been the purchase of the Manville property, and then how that's going to be developed, that's yet to be seen. But I think if you don't have a roadmap of where you're going and how to get there, then, you're not going to be very successful at it. So I think that it would be prudent, and I just put, I just think $30,000, it may be less. I don't think it'll be more. But this is a placeholder of where to start for a comprehensive plan. But I would hope that council would give that great consideration, because I think that is something that we would benefit from, not just now, but down the road.
Any other discussion about this line item or this department?
I have other questions about it, but.
Go ahead.
Okay, so line item 58, the $100,000. So we asked, that was approved last year, $100,000, and that is for Manville stuff. Is that correct?
Well, it was $25,000 for Manville stuff, $75,000 for the matching grant, which is not going to get, by all accounts, is not going to get spent out of this budget year.
So, I'm sorry, you're going to have to refresh my memory. So we had $75,000 in a matching grant out of that
The
100?
flap grant. Yes.
Kayak launch.
No. My understanding from last year, and we did it, let me look here. That $100,000, I don't recall that having to do anything with the flap grant.
My recollection was it was $25,000 for Manville and $75,000 for the matching of the flap grant. I can verify that, and I'd be happy to get back to you, but I'm telling you that's the impression that I have been living under.
Okay, because when the flap grant came about, that was an 80-20 grant, and I believe, we were looking at $360,000, and then we would be 20% of that. So I don't recall that being that way at all.
Okay. I'm just telling you that's the way I have proceeded this year, so obviously I can be wrong.
So when
I'd
has
be
that?
happy to.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when that flap grant, we were told we were awarded the flap grant, but that has not come before council. We have not accepted that grant.
I don't know.
My recollection, we're waiting on the federal government, okay?
We're actually
We
waiting.
approved federal land acquisition program application for the kayak launch at the Riverside on Manville. We got approved for the grant. Tony applied for it. We got it. And now we have to have our 20% reserved for whenever the federal government gets around to giving us our 80%, which hasn't happened. So we are just carrying that over again for those funds that have already been approved by council. And then the remaining 25, and I'll just give you the quick update. My understanding with respect to any remaining Manville budget, we probably have some funds left. We're within the overall budget. We are expecting our final report. I talked, and because I heard you'd ask a question, I didn't review what you sent, but, so I did check with Tom. I think we are good in our funds and what we've paid to get to our final report, and unless the DEP comes back and puts additional work on, which has happened periodically through this process, we should be, in terms of the remediation through the voluntary remediation program, we should be square and done.
Okay, let me come back a little bit because I'm lost in this process. Generally speaking, when you are awarded a grant, you then the council has to be notified of that, and we have to accept that grant.
That all happened.
That's what I'm asking. When did
Yes,
that happen?
It happened.
I've asked this.
Well, you got to go back and look at the minutes.
I have, and I've asked this question today through several emails. I've not got an answer. I'm not trying to say that I'm 100% right. I'm just, please steer me to where the answer is. But nobody's been able to do that.
If you go back through the minutes and search, just like anyone else would do that you have to ask, which I'm doing now, you will find the minutes in the meeting when we presented to council the opportunity and to apply for the flap grant. Did we have the authority to do that? Council voted yes. We applied. We are awarded. And so now we are committed to our share unless council undoes it. So it's in the minutes, and you just got to go
Well,
find it.
I believe you, Jim. I'm just,
Okay, well,
you can find them, and I would love to read the
Well,
circumstances
look
on
at
that
the press
flap grant.
release on the flap grant. It took me about 30 seconds. Funding secured for 2 area kayak launches and road improvements. And I think this was dated.
That's a press release?
Yeah,
Not a
but it's gonna
resolution
I mean, like I
accepting
said,
money?
I'm looking in the minutes, but it's in there. So
your
the
press release.
information is there.
A
Go-
press release, okay.
No, I'm not saying a press. No, I'm saying the information is in the minutes for the city. If you want to go find it, go look in prior minutes until you find the flap grant, read the minutes, and then you'll know what happened.
And Russ, that would come as a resolution, is that right?
Pardon?
So we would just need to, I was asking Russ if that comes as a resolution.
Yes.
So then we would just need to go back and look through it. Okay.
Yes.
I'll see.
The reason the $75,000 was in the budget is so it could be allocated, because if not, we would have had to come back, do a budget revision, take it out of contingency or wherever would be the best place to pull that. If you put it in the budget up front, it's already there. Okay,
Well,
so
and
that's where the,
$75,000 would be a big hit to contingencies. So we try not, quite honestly, I think we felt like things were going to get started on it, but then this grant got funneled through the West Virginia Department of Highways. By no fault of ours or anyone, that's just how the federal government decided to do it. And so now we're at the mercy, I understand, with West Virginia Department of Highways to do anything. So that is getting pushed back till after July 1st, and then we are supposedly going to be able to start the process. Am I correct in that?
absolutely.
So, that brings me,
What was your question? When did we approve it? Is that what you're looking for?
that was one of my questions today, yes. And I honestly don't remember. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I don't remember it. I can't find it. I wanted to read the flap grant, which would have been included.
I have a copy of the flap grant. I don't know when it was approved. I
Okay,
didn't have
well,
time to go back and do that, but I actually have a copy of the grant that I can send you.
That would be great because, my recollection was the $100,000 was just, we were going to put stuff, $100,000 in that line item as things, would need to happen down at Spencer's Landing or on Manville and part of the remediation, so on and so forth, which is totally fine. I don't have a problem with it. And I'm pro kayak launches, I would like to see Spencer's Landing be developed, but I'm just trying to get my bearings on this money because once again, I found out today when we're talking about the trees that were removed, because I get calls about these trees all the time, that one day the trees are just removed, okay? And then I've asked, well, where did the money come from the trees to remove the trees? That came out of the streets department. So I am so confused about what's going on that out of that line item.
I felt like I explained that pretty well. I believe that when we looked at that invoice and I looked at what actually comes out of Manville, that money was pretty much set aside for remediation purposes in Manville. And so that's how I've operated over the last several years. And that's how that gets into our depreciation schedules. That gets adjusted every year by the auditor, by myself. We look at that every year, the change. But when you go past the remediation part, right? And I can move that expense. That account has plenty of money in it. It can be spent out of there. But between Craig and I, who's not here anymore, that's where it was decided that it was going to be, because now you're no longer remediating. You're starting like work.
Right.
And so then that no longer becomes the cost of that fixed asset, which is what has been being tracked there.
Okay, so I just find it just odd, and maybe it's my thought process, how you take money out of 570 streets, line item 41, which is material and supplies, and use that on Spencer's Landing to remove trees. And then we come back to the budget for tree beautification, and we have to put, I think it's $16,000 in that budget for trees, because we just removed trees, because you have, and I understand.
I don't, quite honestly, if you're going to have a discussion about trees, I am not your person.
No, my discussion's about
So,
the money.
and so I am very sorry that that decision was made, because obviously you feel very strongly that it should have come out of that council line item. I made it with the best of intentions. There was nothing underhanded about it. I made it based on where I thought that bill should be paid. Now, I'd be more than happy to spend 10 seconds and move that cost to Manville where you can see it.
I'm not, I'm not trying to
say
be.
for a $4,000 expense, I've spent like 2 hours today trying to
Well,
justify the existence of this payment.
and I understand your
When
frustration.
both,
I have my frustration as well, because my job as a council person is oversight, and this should have gone through council, the tree removal, and it didn't, okay? And now we have money moving out of streets into Spencer's Landing, and there's no conversation about it. And yet I still have to face the public, who I do get emails, calls about the trees. People are very upset about the trees, and I don't have an answer because, well, I don't know, I just saw them tore down like, excavated out like everybody else. So that's my point. That's what I'm upset about, is that it didn't go
I
through.
paid the bill, that was really my
What
word.
does this have to do with the budget? I mean, this isn't on the agenda. If you want to have a public discussion about this issue, it has to be put on, this is beyond the scope. Russ, I'm going to ask you to,
Why I'm asking about it, because there's $100,000 in this line item,
okay,
and I'm
well, you
trying
can
to
ask
figure
about
out.
the $100,000
The
line item, but that's
$100,000
not what you're asking about, okay? So I'm going to ask Russ that this is not been properly noticed for this agenda this evening. And if she wants to bring it up, put it on an agenda and get all into it and give everybody an opportunity to be prepared equally to discuss it as our responsibility of council, fine.
Well, I think part of the question is a reasonable question. I think to explore the issue further, maybe we should set aside for discussion so everybody has an opportunity to understand what the issue is, including me, because I'm not aware of what it is, so that I can give a meaningful answer.
Thank you, Russ. That sounds great.
So the $100,000 and why it is there. It was there for $75,000 for a kayak launch match and $25,000 for any continued Manville work. If you would like to make any changes to that, that is perfectly your right. The city auditor line item, I made a couple of decreases in that line item. Do you have any questions? Also, the purchasing department, there's very little in there. I made a couple of decreases. In one line item, I upped the materials and supplies up to $750 just because the amount of things we have to get, basically printed, purchase orders, requisitions, ink costs, they just keep going up. Any questions on that? The recycling program, this is basically a pass-through. You'll see on the revenue sides, when we get there, you'll have a revenue of similar amounts. The only difference being that we typically spend a few $1,000s every year on additional recycling buckets. City Hall. You'll notice City Hall line item 11 for the telephone. We have found somebody that is in the process of doing a professional service for looking at the phone system costs to try to make sure that we are doing our due diligence as to what those costs are, what they should be, make sure we don't get, a few years into this and we're paying for things that we shouldn't be, because it's very complicated. You go to line item 15, it was reduced several $1,000s because last year we put, I believe it was $65,000 in the budget for repairs to this building. which have been put out to bid and which will begin in the spring. Other than that, there was a slight increase in materials and supplies. Do you have any questions?
Oh, I have a question. Going back to line item 11, and can you repeat what you just said about professional, who,
We have somebody that is looking at our phone bills to make sure the bills are very complicated. We got a new phone system and then we lost
okay,
our,
so that's my question. So it's beyond the phone system? We talked about this, I think, the last time, last Thursday. So that's the Segra system, that is
Yes.
everything, right?
well, it's internet, it's phones,
Right.
yes.
So, and that's kind of, it's kind of a parlor trick you have to play in sense of spreading out amongst all these departments,
Yes.
because I think line item
There
11.
are several departments that are affected.
Right, that we have a big question mark on that. So
Yes.
are you considering doing something different than the current situation with Segra?
Not necessarily. I just, if you would, I mean, the mayor has looked at these bills. I know Russ has looked at these bills. They are very complicated to make sure that we are paying what we should be paying.
Right.
I mean, they are 35 pages long. And I don't feel like I have the expertise
Sure,
to say whether, I just don't feel like I do. And so, this was all done by Chris McGrew.
right,
And then the bills start coming.
right. And I've had experience in this kind of situation, and it starts out at one way, and we think that's the way it's going to be, and then it's like, boom,
Yes.
big explosion in what the costs are. So,
I don't want to get into it and somebody say, why are your phone bills so expensive? I think we need to do it. We need to look at it now so that we can feel secure with it going forward.
gotcha.
So that number will be filled in, I hope, in the next couple of weeks. Anything else? You go to contingencies, I've made no change in contingencies. It's at 175,000 for the year. And obviously, that's just for things that we don't know are gonna come up. You can set the state allows a certain percentage to be set aside in contingencies, and we haven't really adjusted ours in several years.
What is that percentage, do you know?
I can't even remember now. It was 3%,
Okay,
but it may have changed.
okay,
But, you don't want to tie up a lot of dollars there. You just want to feel secure that if you need it, it is there. Thank you.
Amy, thank you. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Are there any council comments?
Let's stick to the numbers.
that's what we're trying to
Okay.
do.
All right, no comments this evening. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.